Fear is what you feel. Brave is what you do. The great philosopher Emma Watson once said, quote, "There's nothing wrong with being afraid. It's not the absence of fear, it's overcoming it. Sometimes you have to blast through and have faith," close quote. As a surprise gift of appreciation for their boss, a group of employees arranged for him to have a ride in a fighter jet at a nearby airfield. Not knowing that the man was utterly terrified of flying. Moreover, the boss had no idea about the surprise until he reached the airfield. Not wanting to disappoint his employees, the 64-year-old bravely boarded the fighter jet. However, the data from a smartwatch shows that before the flight, his heart was just racing, a heart rate ranging from 136 to 142 beats per minute, a resting heart rate. That's insane. While on the fighter jet, about 2,500 feet above the earth, going an estimated 870 miles per hour, the passenger panicked and reached for something to hold on to. Unfortunately, that something just happened to be the ejection handle. The 64-year-old man was shot out from the fighter jet at 2,500 feet, going 870 miles per hour. Forgive me, but I just find this story to be so hilarious. To make matters worse, he had not securely attached his helmet, so it went flying off. It went flying off of his head when he was flung out into the air. Fortunately, his parachute deployed, and the man tumbled to earth with only minor injuries. Speaking of fear, I'm guessing the pilot had fears of his own during this incident. After all, he was very unexpectedly relieved of his cockpit canopy mid-flight and his passenger. Yet he managed to keep his head and safely managed to land the plane back on the runway. Life throws us all unexpected curveballs, challenges, and injustices. It is therefore important that we recognize when fear is trying to pilot our thought process and eject that fear, instead of jettisoning our courage and our good judgment instead. During my senior year of high school, I knew what I wanted to do for a living. I wanted to play the bass guitar professionally, but I doubted myself, so I didn't dare tell anybody that that was my dream. For starters, I'd only been playing bass for a year, but I knew I loved it. Then there's the fact that I grew up in a small fishing community in Alaska that was about 8.5 hours by boat from the nearest city. We had 17 miles total of paved road on our island and no traffic lights. In other words, it's not like there were lots of jobs for professional bassists in my hometown, so living my dream would mean leaving everything that I had ever known. Although I was underage, I used to sneak into Frankie Haig's Quixote Club to check out the new bands when they came to town. By the way, I didn't try to buy alcohol while I was there. I was all about the orange juice and the music. On one of those visits, I learned that there was turmoil in the band that was playing at the club. Although it had just arrived in Sitka from Ventura, California, the members of the band called Night Shift did not get along with their bass player. I saw this as my chance. So one night I snuck a tape recorder into the club and I recorded one of their sets. Actually, I think I recorded all of their sets. The next day, though, I taught myself one of those sets, all the songs in one of the sets. That afternoon, I went to the apartment where the band resided and I knocked on the door. I can honestly say I was not scared. I was terrified. I was on the brink of full-out panic. In fact, I thought about running after I knocked on their door. As fate would have it, the entire band was in except for the bass player. I asked if I could visit with them for a moment, and they let me in. I told them that I had heard that their bassist was thinking of leaving the band. They corrected me. He had just told them that day that he was leaving and going back to California. I took a deep breath and I told them that I am a bass player and a good one too. I told them that I could take over for their bassist right away if needed. They were visibly shocked by what I said. They were not expecting a 17-year-old kid to knock on the door of their apartment, let himself in, and tell them that. And although they tried, they couldn't quite hide their amusement. They told me very nicely that they just were not interested in me as their bass player. Besides, their agent was sending up a replacement bassist from California. And I knew before I got there that they would probably reject me, so I was ready for that. I had a counter answer ready for them when they did reject me. That's fine, I said, but he or she won't be here tonight, right? So here's what I propose. Let me play the first set with you. The first set is early in the night, and it's when there are the least number of people there in the club. If I'm not getting it done, just ask me to stop at any point during the set, and I'll leave the stage. That's fine. However, I said with a grin, if I am doing well, then on our first break, let's talk again about me being your new bass player. They looked at each other like they just didn't know what to say, and they were hoping one of the others did. What do you have to lose? I asked with a smile. Okay, the guitarist said. He was also the band leader. You can play the first song of the first set, and we'll see then how it goes. Even though I'd made a recording of their sets already, I had them write down all the songs of the first set, just in case something had changed. I wanted to make doubly sure I was ready to play with them that evening. I had butterflies when I took the stage that night, but I also knew I was prepared. I knew I could play those songs really well, and I was excited for the band to discover that too. Thankfully, the departing bassist was cooperative. I think maybe because he was curious, but perhaps because he just didn't want to play with those guys. I don't know what the deal was, but he let me use his rig, his amp and speaker cabinet to plug into so that I could play with them. I didn't have to bring that gear and hassle with all that. Not only did I nail that set and become a member of that band, I also became a novelty and a draw for the nightclub. During the gigs, the band would announce me as their new bass player from Sitka, Alaska, and that brought cheers from the crowd in the club. And they would tell other people, and more people would come to the club to check out the situation. Because I was underage, I was made to leave the club on breaks. I could only be in the club when I'm on the stage playing. But you know, what nobody told me was that even when you're living your dreams, life will still present you with new fears and new challenges to overcome. For example, I soon had an agent in Santa Barbara, California, and he was sending me all around the West and the Western states to do studio work and to play in nightclubs. But I'd never driven in a place that had traffic lights, much less multiple lanes that went in the same direction before. I'd never driven on a freeway. Consequently, I had to quickly learn how to have what I called an urban mindset, and I had to overcome my fears of living in a city and in the lower 48. Also, every time I showed up for a gig, I feared the unknown. What if this would be the time where my inexperience as a bass player, having only played for a little more than a year, would be outed and everybody would know? What if they had a challenge that I could not rise to? And as I dealt with those fears showing up at those gigs, I discovered something about myself. I learned that if I worry about failing, it makes me more likely to fail. Does that make sense? But if I just focused on what needed doing and not on whether or not I could actually do it, I found I was more able to learn it and get it done. When you think about it, fear is neither bad nor good. What's bad or good is what we do when we're faced with fear. For example, if your doctor gives you a prescription and you break out in a rash from it, you're having what the doctors call a reaction to the medicine. Reactions are bad. Reactions happen to us. However, if the medicine is helping you heal, then your body is responding to the medication, they say, and responding is good. So I say that the key to facing our fears lies in responding to them and not reacting. We all have fears. Some people fear flying. My mom sure did. She was hilarious to try to get onto a plane and the whole flight long. Others fear public speaking. Some fear failure. Others fear the unknown. Some fear letting people down. Others fear that they'll learn they're not good enough, so they don't try things and find out for sure. Some fear being wrong. Others fear being alone. Whatever our fears, we have to be honest with ourselves and identify clearly what it is that we fear. Then give your fears some thought in advance, before the heat of a moment. Try to figure out what you can do to respond when faced to those fears rather than react. Use times of peace and clarity of reason to think through and come up with rational responses to your fears. As it happens, I am currently facing some of my worst fears. At the moment, it feels like something that I have dedicated my entire adult life to is in fear of failing. So I offer this bit of advice as well. Always keep your Heavenly Father aware of how you feel and include Him in your daily thought processes all day long. Be close to Him always, not just in moments of dire need. As it says in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 68, verse 6, "Wherefore be of good cheer, and do not fear, for I, the Lord, am with you, and will stand by you." Thanks for listening. Gonat Chish.